Be me, name is Klaus. 47 years old. Senior Master Engineer. Meister certification. 23 years of experience. Third generation at this company. My grandfather built turbines here. My father built turbines here. I have built turbines here since I was 24. Watched an American consultant destroy it all. In less than 6 months.
Because she thought spreadsheets
knew more about engineering than the men who had done it for decades. This is the story of how an American diversity consultant came to a German precision engineering firm and implemented gender quotas that ignored everything we had built over generations. How she dismissed the Meister system as outdated, replaced technical competence with demographic targets, and triggered a walkout that silenced machines that had run continuously for 40 years. I'm going to tell you about the collision between ideology and precision, between theory and practice, between someone who had never built anything and people who had built everything, and how that collision destroyed a reputation that took 3 generations to build. The company was Hartmann Precisionstechnik, a family-owned engineering firm in Baden-Württemberg specializing in precision turbine components for aerospace and energy applications. We were what Germans call Mittelstand, a mid-sized company that forms the backbone of German industrial excellence. Our components flew in aircraft engines worldwide. Our turbines generated power across Europe. The work we did required perfection. Tolerances measured in microns. Materials that cost thousands per kilogram. Processes that took years to master. A single mistake could destroy a component worth more than most cars. Or worse, cause a failure in an aircraft engine. At 30,000 feet, there was no room for learning on the job. Our hiring system reflected that reality. The Meister system, a German tradition going back centuries, meant that engineers progressed through rigorous apprenticeships, certifications, and years of supervised practice before touching critical components. A Meister certification took 7 to 10 years to achieve. It represented mastery that couldn't be rushed, shortcut, or faked. Heinrich was our chief engineer. 58 years old, 34 years at the company. His hands had touched more precision components than most engineers would see in a lifetime. He could diagnose problems by sound alone, could feel tolerances that instruments struggled to measure. His knowledge existed nowhere in writing. It lived in his hands, his eyes, his experience. I reported to Heinrich, led a team of 12 engineers responsible for the most demanding turbine assemblies. Every member of my team had earned their position through years of demonstrated excellence. We didn't hire based on credentials alone. We hired based on proven capability, tested under pressure, validated by results. The company had women engineers. Ingrid had been with us for 18 years. One of the best metallurgists in the industry. She had earned her position the same way everyone else had. Through the Meister system. Through years of proving herself. Nobody questioned her competence. Because she had demonstrated it conclusively. The trouble began when Werner, our plant director, announced that corporate had hired a consultant to help us modernize our talent acquisition strategies. The phrase meant nothing to us at the time. We were engineers. We spoke in specifications and tolerances, not corporate euphemisms. We would learn what the words actually meant soon enough. Addison arrived on a Monday morning in March. 38 years old, American. MBA from a prestigious business school. Background in diversity consulting. Had never worked in manufacturing. Had never built anything with her hands. Had never seen a turbine except in photographs. But she had theories about how we should hire. Her first week was observation and interviews. She met with department heads, reviewed our hiring statistics, analyzed our workforce demographics. She asked questions that seemed disconnected from our actual work. How many women were in senior engineering roles? What percentage of new hires were female? Did we have targets for gender representation? We answered honestly. About 15% of our engineers were women, roughly matching the percentage of women who graduated from German engineering programs with relevant specializations. We hired the best qualified candidates, regardless of gender. That was our policy and our practice. Addison's report landed like a bomb 3 weeks after her arrival. She had identified what she called systemic barriers to gender equity throughout our organization. The Meister system, she argued, was inherently exclusionary, creating artificial obstacles that disadvantaged women. Our hiring practices perpetuated historical imbalances rather than correcting them. Her recommendation was immediate implementation of a 50-50 gender quota across all technical departments. Within 18 months, new hires would be required to meet parity targets. Promotions would be evaluated against demographic goals. The Meister system would be modernized to remove barriers to rapid advancement. Heinrich requested a meeting with Werner immediately. I was present as his deputy. Heinrich explained, in the patient tone of someone who has taught for decades, why Addison's recommendations would be catastrophic. The Meister system wasn't a barrier. It was quality control. The years of training weren't arbitrary. They were necessary. He explained what happens when untrained hands touch precision components, the tolerances that couldn't be achieved without experience, the safety protocols that took years to internalize, the institutional knowledge that couldn't be documented, only transferred through mentorship. He explained that our components kept aircraft in the sky, that mistakes killed people. Werner listened politely and then explained the corporate reality. Hartmann had been acquired by a larger international conglomerate 3 years ago. The parent company had diversity targets. Regulators were asking questions. Investors were asking questions. The optics of our workforce demographics were problematic. Changes were necessary. Heinrich asked if optics would keep aircraft engines running. Werner said that wasn't the framing we needed. Heinrich asked if diversity targets understood metallurgy. Werner said that resistance to change was also being noted. The message was clear. Comply or be labeled as the problem. Heinrich was 60 years old. Too old to start over. He went quiet. The quota implementation began the following month. HR was instructed to prioritize female candidates regardless of qualification levels. Open positions that would normally require Meister certification were relabeled as developmental roles that could be filled by candidates with less experience. The standards that had maintained our quality were being dismantled. Megan was one of the first quota hires. 27 years old, American like Addison. Mechanical engineering degree from a decent university. 2 years of experience at a general manufacturing company. Had never worked with aerospace tolerances. Had never touched a turbine component. Was assigned to my team to work on critical assemblies. I raised concerns through proper channels. Explained that Megan's background didn't include the specific competencies required for our work. Suggested she be placed in a training role, learning from experienced engineers, progressing through the system as everyone else had. HR responded that my concerns reflected unconscious bias against women in technical roles. The accusation stung. Not because it was true, but because it was so obviously false. Ingrid had been on my team for 12 years. I had recommended her for promotion 3 times. I had no bias against women engineers. I had bias against unqualified people, touching components that required qualification, and being told I couldn't say so. Megan struggled immediately. The work was beyond her current capabilities, not because she was incapable of eventually learning, but because she hadn't learned yet. She made errors that experienced engineers caught before they caused problems. But experienced engineers couldn't watch her constantly. They had their own work to do. Lucas, one of my younger engineers, came to me after the first month. He said the atmosphere was becoming impossible. He was spending more time checking Megan's work than doing his own. When he tried to correct her mistakes, she became defensive, accused him of being unsupportive. When he escalated to HR, he was told to be more collaborative. The same pattern repeated across departments. Quota hires placed in roles beyond their capabilities. Experienced engineers expected to cover the gaps. Quality standards quietly declining. As overworked supervisors couldn't catch every error, the precision that defined us was being diluted day by day. Ingrid came to me privately after the second month. She was furious, more than I had ever seen her. She said Addison's approach was an insult to every woman who had earned her position through genuine accomplishment. She said the quota hires were being set up to fail, placed in roles they weren't ready for, then blamed when they struggled. She said the message to women was clear. You can't succeed on merit. You need special accommodation, lower standards, different rules. She had spent 18 years proving that was wrong, and Addison was undoing all of it in the name of helping women, while actually insulting them. The safety incident happened in the 4th month. A stress test on a turbine blade assembly revealed a critical flaw that should have been caught during machining. The flaw was traced to a tolerance deviation in a component that had been worked on by one of the new developmental hires. The deviation was small, but in precision engineering, small deviations kill. Heinrich called an emergency review, documented the error chain meticulously, showed exactly where the quality control had failed, presented it to Werner with recommendations for immediate remediation, for returning to qualification requirements, for acknowledging that the quota system was creating unacceptable risks. Addison attended the meeting at Werner's invitation. When Heinrich finished his presentation, she responded before Werner could speak. She said Heinrich's analysis demonstrated exactly the kind of resistance to change that she had warned about, that focusing on one isolated error ignored the broader benefits of a diverse workforce, that technical critiques were often masks for deeper discomfort with inclusion. Heinrich stared at her for a long moment, then spoke very quietly. He asked if she understood what the error could have caused, if it had reached an aircraft engine, if the blade had failed at altitude, if people had died, because we prioritized demographics over competence. Addison said that catastrophizing was a common resistance technique, that safety had always been used as an excuse to maintain exclusionary systems, that Heinrich's attachment to traditional methods was precisely why outside perspectives were needed. She suggested he might benefit from bias training to help him understand his reactions. I watched Heinrich's face change. Something shifted behind his eyes. 34 years of dedication. 3 decades of keeping people safe. Dismissed as bias by someone who had never built anything, who didn't understand what she was risking, who thought his expertise was a character flaw. The coordination began that evening. Heinrich reached out to the other senior Meisters quietly. They met at a beer garden away from the facility. I was invited as one of the younger senior engineers. The conversation was grim but clear. The company we had devoted our careers to no longer valued what we did. Continuing to work there meant accepting responsibility for failures we couldn't prevent. The decision was unanimous. If the company wouldn't protect standards, we would protect ourselves. We would not attach our names to work we couldn't guarantee. We would not be responsible when something failed and someone got hurt. The walkout happened on a Thursday morning. At 7 a.m., as the first shift was beginning, 63 senior engineers and technicians placed their tools on their workbenches, removed their safety equipment, and walked toward the exits. No shouting, no protest signs, no drama. Just quiet professionals leaving a situation that had become untenable. I was among them. 23 years of service ending. Because I was told my experience was bias. And my standards were exclusion. I left my workbench exactly as I found it 23 years ago. Clean, organized, ready for the next person. Whoever that would be. Whoever would be qualified to replace me. Heinrich led the walkout without leading it. He simply walked out first and we followed. At the gate, he turned and looked back at the facility one last time. His father had worked there. His grandfather had worked there. 3 generations of precision and excellence. He said nothing, just turned and walked to his car. The production floor fell silent that morning. Machines that had run continuously for 40 years stood idle for the first time since they were installed. The new hires didn't know how to operate them. Didn't know the startup sequences, the calibration procedures, the maintenance protocols. That existed only in the heads of the people who had left. Werner called an emergency meeting with Addison and Hoffman from HR. They tried to contact the engineers who had walked out, offering to discuss concerns, suggesting mediation. Most didn't respond. Those who did had the same answer: restore the Meister system and the qualification requirements, or the conversation was over. Addison recommended against capitulating, said it would reward resistance, send the wrong message, undermine the progress they had made. She suggested recruiting internationally for engineers willing to embrace the new culture. She seemed not to understand that the skills couldn't be recruited. They had to be developed over decades. Decades that couldn't be purchased. The client calls began within days. Aerospace companies with contracts depending on our components wanted to know what was happening. Energy companies expecting turbine deliveries wanted reassurance. The Made in Germany guarantee that justified our premium pricing was meaningless without the German expertise that made it true. Tanaka flew in from Japan personally, representative of one of our largest aerospace clients. He toured the silent production floor, asked where the Meister engineers had gone. When Werner explained the situation vaguely, Tanaka asked specific questions about who would certify the quality of components going into Japanese aircraft engines. Werner couldn't provide satisfactory answers. Tanaka returned to Japan and recommended contract termination. The precision components his company required could not be guaranteed by the current workforce. His report was shared with other aerospace clients. Within 2 months, 6 major contracts were suspended pending quality reassurance. The financial impact was devastating. Revenue dropped 40%. Orders were canceled or postponed. The company that had been profitable for 60 years posted its first quarterly loss, then its second. The parent conglomerate began asking questions about what had happened in Baden-Württemberg. Addison departed quietly before the third quarter results were announced. Her contract was terminated by mutual agreement, according to the press release. She updated her LinkedIn to reflect that she was pursuing new opportunities. Her diversity consulting business continued, presumably implementing similar strategies at other companies that hadn't heard what happened to us. Werner survived longer, but not by much. He was replaced by a new plant director, someone from the parent company who was tasked with salvaging what remained. The new director's first action was reaching out to the engineers who had walked out. He offered return bonuses, salary increases, guarantees that qualification standards would be restored. Heinrich declined. He had taken a consulting role with a competitor, advising on exactly the kind of quality systems we used to have. His expertise was valued there. His experience was respected. He wasn't coming back to a company that had called his dedication bias. I declined as well. Found a position at a smaller firm that still used the Meister system, that still valued experience over demographics, that understood why precision requires patience and expertise requires time. The salary was lower. The respect was higher. The trade was worth it. About 30% of the walkout engineers eventually returned. They needed the jobs, had families depending on them, couldn't afford to wait for alternatives. They returned to a company that had been humbled, but not fundamentally changed. The quotas were quietly adjusted, but not eliminated. The Meister requirements were partially restored, but with exceptions. The quality never fully recovered. The clients who left didn't all return. The reputation that took 3 generations to build was permanently damaged by 6 months of ideology, imposed by someone who didn't understand what she was destroying until it was already destroyed. Ingrid became the new chief engineer after Heinrich's departure, the first woman in that role, promoted because she was genuinely excellent, because she had earned it through decades of work, not because of a quota. She told me later that the promotion felt hollow, because it came after the destruction of the system that had validated her. She said she would always wonder whether people thought she got the job because of ability or policy, whether her accomplishments were real or assisted. That doubt had never existed before Addison. Before the quotas made every success suspicious, even the ones that were genuine. The company still operates today. Smaller than before, less prestigious, no longer the first choice for aerospace contracts. The Made in Germany guarantee means less when the Germans who made it are gone. replaced by a workforce that's more diverse and less capable, both because of the same policy. The lesson should be obvious, but apparently isn't, because I still see companies implementing similar programs, prioritizing demographics over capability, treating expertise as an obstacle rather than an asset, and being surprised when excellence leaves. You cannot mandate competence through quotas. You cannot accelerate mastery through policy. You cannot replace decades of experience with good intentions and demographic targets. The machines don't care about your ideology. They care about whether the hands touching them know what they're doing. Precision engineering is not fair. It doesn't care about your background, your identity, or your intentions. It only cares about whether you can do the work at the tolerances required, with the consistency demanded. That's not exclusion. That's reality. And reality doesn't negotiate. Germany has a word, Fachkraft. It means skilled specialist. Someone with deep expertise in a specific domain. Someone who has mastered their craft through years of dedicated practice. You cannot create Fachkraft through quotas. You can only develop them through time and destroy them through disrespect. Addison never understood this. Never understood what she was touching, what she was dismantling, what she was destroying. She saw numbers on a spreadsheet and thought rearranging them was progress. She didn't see the hands, the experience, the lives dedicated to excellence. That walked out the door when she told them they were the problem. Anyway, that's my story about American gender quotas in German engineering, about the collision between ideology and precision, about the walkout that silenced the machines, about decades of expertise vanishing overnight. Because someone decided demographics mattered more than the skills that kept aircraft in the sky. The turbines still need to spin. The aircraft still need to fly. The standards still need to be met. No matter what the consultants say, no matter what the quotas demand, reality doesn't care about policy, only about competence. And competence doesn't come from spreadsheets. It comes from people who you just drove away.